Hey there, this is Melanie from Chasing Fi, and today we are going to talk a little bit about how the company we keep affects our financial well being. Have you ever tried to have a conversation about finances with your friends? Maybe even some of your family members? Do they change the subject or give some speech about how they're being victimized by the system? Or do you have a friend who is always just about to get rich? You know the one. The person that participates in every multi-level marketing company there is, has been to just about every business opportunity, conference that they can find, but they really have no clear direction in their finances. They're just looking for a way to get rich quick. In the past, I had all those people in my life. Turns out most of them actually weren't my friends, and they faded away long before I began this financial independence journey. Over the past year, though, I've been reflecting on people who have come into my life and eventually fallen out of it. So I've been thinking about people's money stories, the friends that I spent time with when I was younger. What were their money stories? It's very interesting to see how my money struggles changed as I distanced myself from those who either portrayed themselves as being victims of the system or they were trying to beat the system. The best way to fight this battle is to learn how the system works and use it to your advantage. But it took me a while to learn that lesson. In this episode, I will share some of my experiences in hopes that others will be able to learn from my mistakes and start making smart, informed money decisions immediately. So one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn, it took me way too long to learn this, I had to learn the difference between friends and acquaintances. So friends are people who share a mutual affection, they're supportive, they're kind, they want the best for each other. This is not going to be everyone that you meet. If there's a spark or a gradual closeness that appears over time, great. If not, be nice and friendly, but don't start counting everyone you meet as a friend. Acquaintances are people you come into contact with on a regular basis. Co-workers, people that work at businesses you frequent, and random folks you encounter on a regular basis are not automatically your friends. For example, if you have a favorite breakfast place, you might end up with the same waiter each time you go. You might even start to request to sit in that person's section and make small talk. You may like the waiter a lot, but he's still just an acquaintance. So when does an acquaintance become a friend? Now, over the years, several acquaintances have become really good friends of mine. In fact, I have one friend that I met when I was working at a restaurant, and we still talk several times a week. We've been friends for well over 2 decades. We are very different people, but there were enough things to connect us that we became real friends. We put forth effort to see each other, to make contact. That's how you know that you have a real friend. But let's talk about when that transition from acquaintances to friendship happens. So let's think about this waiter. In the previous example, say you go to that cafe for breakfast, maybe once a week or whatever. Maybe the two of you have a short chat about how you both enjoy, let's say, snowshoeing. Next, you exchange information, and in time, after more visits to the cafe and longer conversations on an array of topics, you meet up with this waiter for snowshoeing, and the two of you find that you have more in common, or you just like talking with one another. And if that continues, you two are moving into friendship territory. Now, if you, after that, stop going to the cafe, you decide you're not going out to eat anymore, and then you don't talk to that person anymore, that waiter that you liked and had gone snowshoeing with, that's not a friend. That was an acquaintance that you had some things in common with. You hung out. That's it. Let it go. Don't try to pursue acquaintances as friends. Let the friendships happen naturally. For example, say you continue to have breakfast at the cafe for, say, 3 more years. You continue to sit in that person's section. The two of you exchange pleasantries and basic conversation, but that's it. That's fine. That's not a friendship. So you don't need to start to try to make that a friendship. This is something you two are acquaintances, and that's totally fine. Not everyone has to be your friend. And I'm telling you this story because I've been guilty of not recognizing friends and acquaintances and the difference between it. And because of that, my financial growth was stunted for quite some time. So in early adulthood, I was confused about who my friend was and who was my acquaintance. So after high school, I got into a terrible relationship when I was 18, and it ended in my early 20s. At that time, I just wanted familiar things, and the job I'd worked back when I was 18 hired me back. I was searching for community, and I reconnected with coworkers that I'd worked with at the previous location. I met them the first time I was in the restaurant industry, and anyone who's worked in the restaurant industry knows that because of your hours that you work, you're usually working most of the holidays, you're working in the evenings, you get off late, you have a schedule that's kind of opposite of a lot of other people's schedules, especially in the past. A lot of people were working day shift jobs and they had their weekends free. Schedules are a little different now, but at this time, most of the people I knew that weren't working in restaurants, they worked day jobs. So what ended up happening was that I created bonds with my coworkers. So the old coworkers, they started to feel like friends, and then eventually I had a new group. I had a group of new and old coworkers that I'd hang out with most nights. So even though I was working my way through college and only making about $20,000 a year, I'd venture out to pubs and restaurants after getting off work around midnight. And at the time, I lived at home and helped out with some of the bills, but I still had an opportunity to save most of my money, or I could have paid more on my education out of pocket. But instead of doing that, I formed bonds with people who were reckless with money and had little concern for the future. Some were living a life furnished by their parents, while others had spouses to keep them afloat. I slipped into this mindset where I thought that it was so unfair that I was working so hard at this restaurant and making so little money. And my way of rewarding myself was going out to eat and drink after work with the people I spent the most time with, my coworkers. I found myself broke and very unhappy. I also felt like I was struggling, and I was, partially because I had surrounded myself with others who were wasting money and literally drowning their sorrows in alcohol. Expensive drinks, pricey food, and large tips to show my solidarity with my fellow restaurant industry workers left me broke. Today, I don't talk to 98% of the people that I hung out with back then. I can't even remember some of their names, to be honest. In addition to that, most of the times we hung out, the night ended with arguments or friction because we weren't compatible. I could have been making more connections with my professors at school or working internships while I lived at home, or working on building my writing career, which is what I really wanted to do, or really anything else more productive than what I did with this ragtag crowd. I limited my options by spending most of my free time with this crowd that was going nowhere. In reality, I was missing out on a ton of opportunities. After college, I held on to my restaurant connections, and while there were a few that would eventually become friends, real friends, most of those connections died out as soon as I was no longer convenient to hang out with. See, I moved about 30 minutes away and from the job, and while I was still willing to drive to the other side of town to hang out with people, and since I still worked there, I was always there, but even on my days off, I was willing to drive to hang out with my friends. They weren't interested in returning that favor. If it meant that they needed to come on to my side of town, then forget it. We weren't hanging out. That's when I started to realize that my company only mattered to them because it was convenient. I fought for some of those connections because I was lonely and I thought they were friends. But what was really going on was that these were just people I knew, people I had come into contact with who I never would have been friends with if I had not worked with them for years. I needed to broaden my circle at that point, but I was scared to do so. So I stuck with some of the lukewarm connections I had. One friend in particular, and that's friend with extreme quotes around it, continued to be a part of my life for many years, over 2 decades. This person would call me up and talk my ear off about personal problems without asking what was going on with me. I'm willing to bet that if you quiz this person about my life, they would be able to tell you my first and last name, maybe where I grew up, but that's about it. Because they didn't care about what was going on in my life. All they cared about was having an ear and a friend who would offer advice to them so they could vent. I was a free therapist. So, after 25 years of what I thought was friendship, I offered this person a piece of advice about a business they'd started up because I was running the exact same business. Well, type of business. We weren't in business together. But the person asked for an honest assessment of their project, and I gave a constructive critique of the person's project, and that was the last time I heard from them. Fast forward 2 years later, and my business has tripled. That person's business appears to have lasted about 4 months. I don't really know how much business was going on in that 4 months, but after that, it seemed to just completely die out. But because this person doesn't talk to me anymore, I don't know exactly what happened. So I just look back on that and I'm like, I expended so much energy and time into this friendship that wasn't a real friendship, that was over after a text message. That I just think about all that time. I could have been doing so many productive things. It was such a waste. In reality, what I think happened is that this person found another quote unquote friend who would listen to all their problems and offer advice. So they no longer needed me. When I think back to the long hours I spent on the phone, I think listening to this person's problems, I think, man, I could have been learning about financial education. I could have been plotting a way to save money and to retire early and all these things. So now I recognize that me and this person, we were just acquaintances, and I should have cut ties with them as soon as we didn't work together. Ironically, this is a person who was always chasing money, making schemes, and running into financial ruin. So some of the time I was listening to whatever multi-level marketing or business opportunity or perceived business opportunity they were getting into. And thinking back, I didn't have anything in common with this person other than the fact that I wasn't doing financially well and they weren't doing financially well. I had a scarcity mindset and they had a scarcity mindset. It was that scarcity mindset that bound me with this person. We were always sharing our money woes and how we couldn't get ahead, even though we both ended up making more money over time. The problems were the same. But because we both had this scarcity mindset, it's not like we were discussing the problems and coming up with solutions. We were just complaining about the problems and actually perpetuating them because we were listening to each other saying, yeah, that's not fair. Yeah, we should make more, things like that. But it's not about how much we were making. It's about the fact we didn't know how to manage the money in the first place. So it doesn't matter if you make $1 million, you can't manage it, you'll be in the same predicament. So now that I realize all of this and I look back through my connections that I had from my old job and the ones that have pretty much just, they're gone now, I think about one of the things that we used to talk about a lot, and it was money, how we didn't have it, how we should have made more, we needed a raise, things like that. And now that those connections are gone, I realize how they were holding me back. They were holding me back because they were perpetuating this lie that we were being mistreated and we were working so hard and we were doing all we could to be financially successful and we just weren't. And that was not the case at all. So losing those friendships or acquaintances or connections or whatever they were has exponentially improved my life financially in other ways too. So another lesson I had to learn, and I can't believe it took me this long to learn this one, but I had to learn how to say no, even when the thing I'm saying no to is actually a good thing. But even a good thing can derail you if it's taking away from you pursuing your goals. So, time is a commodity we can't get back, and it's precious. So we shouldn't be wasting it on things that make our lives harder while making someone else's life easy. So let me just give you this example. This is a recent example. So I like to volunteer my time to help those who are less fortunate than I am. But sometimes organizations get to the point where they kind of feel like, okay, you're our volunteer and you've been here for years. So it's almost like, instead of asking you if, hey, are you going to volunteer this year? It's kind of like assume that you're just going to always be there. And and I love this place and I love the volunteer work, but it's an hour away from my home. So I travel to this place 9 months out of the year, for just about every week, in 9-month spans for about 3 years. As my life changed, I started to recognize that the driving was cutting into the time I spent with my husband. Basically, I would leave in the morning and would not get back home until he was on his way to work. I hated not seeing him, but I felt guilty about ending my time volunteering at this particular place. Well, the pandemic hit and the place closed. When it reopened the next year, I just said, no, I'm not going to be able to volunteer this year. Well, this year, I was asked again. The person that was asking me to volunteer is a warm and loving soul, and I truly cherish this person. But there was a lot of pressure for me to say yes. It was like, no on the phone, no in the email, no in the next call, no in the next call. It was like I had to keep saying no because it was like, well, maybe just sometimes, like there was just this like, what do you mean you're not going to do it this year? And I finally just had to say, my life has changed and I love all of you guys, but life is short and I need this time. So I'm not going to be able to do it. That has been one of the best decisions I've made. I love it. I am not missing out on seeing my husband for a full day every week. And I'm not spending tons of money on gas to drive, to have this 2-hour commute. And there are plenty of places in my community where I can volunteer and I can do a 5-10 minute drive, volunteer my time, and be back home, in the amount of time that it would take me to do the one-way trip. So, you have to put it in perspective when you're doing something good, that just because you're doing something good, it doesn't mean that it's good for you. And that was something I did with my teaching career too. I loved my students. I even loved the parents. And I know some people are like, oh, parents are hard to deal with. Nope, loved the parents, loved the students. Loved most of my coworkers, but teaching wasn't good for me, even though there were really good things coming out of it for my students. And I had to leave it behind. So time, if something is taking your time, even if it's good, and it's not good for you, then you have to draw the line. Another thing I've learned about time, which, by the way, it's about 10:53 on a Friday night, and I got off work at 9:30. I work from 2:30 to 9:30 on Fridays, and I'm recording this video now. The reason I'm recording it now is because I'm probably not going to go to bed until about 2:30, because I might lay down, but I'm waiting for my husband to get home. I just need to hear the door open and know that he's home safe, and then I just drift off. So because I have this time, I used to just sit around and watch Netflix or whatever, and then around 1:30 or so, I'd get ready for bed. I might lay down and I just kind of like drift in and out and wait to hear the door or whatever. But that's a lot of time. So if I can do something from 9:30 to even 1:30, I'm making good progress. So now I am using the time that I have. And using time wisely is something that I didn't always do. So that's another reason why I wanted to stop volunteering across town, because I want to work on my businesses. I have a lot going on and I can get it all done if I use my time wisely. That means working shifts at my part-time job and then using the rest of the time I would normally spend at a full-time job to build my business. And I usually work, I'll work on my business about 15, well, the different businesses, about 15 or 20 hours a week. So I work 28 hours at my part-time job. And when I get off, or if I have a break, then I'm working on my businesses. It's a little bit of a hustle, but I enjoy it because it's for me. I have books to write, I have videos to make, and I have life to enjoy. All of those things can be fit into my days as long as I'm not wasting time vegging out on the couch, watching Netflix or the news even, or allowing others to dictate how I use my time. Like I said, teaching, that was something I had to get out of because I worked 7 days a week, and that's not an exaggeration. There was not a day of the week that I wasn't lesson planning, grading papers, or creating curriculum for my students. And that was true even when I was teaching part-time in the classroom. And the reason for that is because, I'm sure that you've seen the articles about how teachers, if a teacher's absent and there's not a substitute teacher, then the other teachers have to use their prep hours to fill in for them. Well, because I taught at charter schools, that was always the case for me. We had trouble finding subs, so my prep periods were spent in other classes covering for teachers. And my lunch hour, I had to go into the lunchroom and do lunch duty. So basically, you don't have any time in the day for you to grade papers, lesson plan, all that stuff. So I did it. I spread it throughout my week and I did it every day. So I learned my lesson from that. Any job, anything that is taking up your time like that, you got to get rid of it, especially if it's stressing you out, which it was. So now I have a schedule where I do what I need to do in the time that I normally would just be vegging out somewhere, watching TV, whatever, or talking to friends that aren't really friends for hours on end, listening to their problems. I use that time to work on my businesses. And I save time for people who truly matter in my life. My mom, if she calls me, I drop everything and I talk to her. And if it's a 2-hour phone call, that's totally fine. I'll make up that time later because she matters to me. She's very important to me. So I'm going to make time for the people that matter. My husband, he works in the evening. That's another reason why I work in the evening, because I want our off time to be time that we can spend together. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm going to have a business, I've got to do things for that after I get off my part-time job. So, and volunteering, like I go for volunteer positions that allow me to step in, get it done. It's not very far, and then get back home. And I do that at times when it's not going to interfere with me spending time with my loved ones. So I've switched my focus. And it really has made a huge difference in my financial independence journey, because now I have a schedule. I'm focused. I'm like, okay, I've got to get this done. And it's not a question of, somebody says, oh, you've got time, you can do that later. No, if that's when I'm getting it done, then that's when I'm getting it done. Unless it's my mom, my husband, my sisters, my dad, unless it's somebody super close to me that I cherish, then it's going to have to wait. So that has helped me so much. And basically this journey, I've learned that all I have to do is work hard, stay focused on my goals, and not get bogged down by people who either see themselves as victims or mavericks who can beat the system. All I have to do is just ignore all that stay focused on my goals, work hard, and I'll be successful. So that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it probably was a little rambly in parts, but but I think that this is really important. And I just think back and I'm like, man, I wish I could have seen this. And I know people who are in similar predicaments now. So I thought it might be a good idea to share. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter at ChasingFire26 because I want 2026 to be my fire year. So get it? All right. I'll see you next time. Take care.